welcome to the emergency room. Hey guys, we're really excited. Louis and I are hosting this today, and we have some amazing guests with us. So we're basically going to be diving into like how research, formal and informal, like helps shape creative practices and its role in advocacy in the visual arts. So yeah, we have two really awesome guests. If you guys would like to introduce yourself as well as Louis, please introduce yourself. That would be great.
Yeah, so I'll just quickly introduce myself. So I'm with the Youth Collective, same with Jen, and I've just finished my degree in architecture, so I'll be joining a practice in October. So that's a bit about me, and I'll let the guest introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Mimi Deering, and I'm the founder of Get It Done, a community arts organisation based in Manchester and South London, supporting people to address issues in their local communities through creativity. This idea of coming together to get things done. I started Get It Done in 2017 as a very DIY informal collective of young artists, and now 8 years later. We've gone on to become an established organisation working mainly in the public realm to produce ambitious creative projects with communities. And yeah, I'm also really excited to be here because me and Louis knew each other from 5 years ago. I ran an arts emergency placement for Louis, and so it's really great that now I'm here 5 years later.
Hi everyone, I'm Eva. I'm a artist educator, facilitator. I'm based in South London. My practice kind of orientates around photography, sculpture, intervention. I'm interested in working with people and places, and using creative means as a kind of sense-making, a kind of sense-making opportunity to think about sight, history, memory, and self. And it's great to be here. I've worked on some young people's projects and I've flagged and signposted Arts Emergency. So
Thank you so much to the both of you. We're super excited to have you two here. So, I mean, you guys did explain a bit about what you guys do, but yeah, so I guess we can kind of just jump into the questions. So our first question was kind of like, so as we said, we're talking about the role of like research and how it plays into like advocacy, especially within the visual arts. So like in terms of your creative practice, like what role does research, whether that's formal or informal, kind of like play in shaping your projects? Like, so if either of you want to kick off with that question, that would be awesome. Thank you.
so I'm freelance. So I work on a lot of different projects. And kind of concurrently, I will have either been invited or commissioned by an organization or a charity, or kind of something in between, to work with a group, a community, artists, otherwise. So it kind of depends. There'll be a moment in which I've either perhaps reached out, so I've proposed or pitched something, or I've been approached, maybe under the guise of a previous project, or kind of otherwise. And the way that kind of started, I began freelancing properly in about probably, I think it was 2022, and then previously I was part employed and freelancing. So that also looked at kind of referencing voluntary projects or other things I've been involved with in that kind of context. Um, so yeah, if I'm approached to work with a particular kind of group, I've worked over 3 years, from 2020 to 2023. I worked with a group of queer young people, and this was across West Sussex with a photography organisation. And so yeah, there was a kind of certain set of skills that I was bringing to those kind of encounters, that along the lines of kind of research, both formal and informal, was also about like what in the sense of training, or how I'd equip myself to be in those spaces. And that might have looked like taking part in particular training around lived experience that was important, for particular groups. And then, yeah, I mean, in terms of kind of formal, more kind of formal research. So much of my work is about kind of facilitating encounters in a group context. So there might have been in relation to place, so there might have been research in and around element of social history around West Sussex, queer experience, what that and how that looked like, and maybe how that's been archived in heritage spaces. And this particular example that we were based out of Worthing. So yeah, I mean that's really important. You're entering a space, and at the time I was based in Brighton, so I was aware of the kind of in part the kind of cultural landscape of Brighton, not so much Worthing, but previous to starting this group, I did some taster sessions in schools. I was working in a sixth form at the time, so there was a sense of that kind of school context and landscape for those that were joining and still in school context. And but kind of wholly there needs to be in my kind of experience there needs to be an informality to when you're in the room with people, recognizing and being responsive to prompts and activities and what might surface from that, and working with young people. And if I think back to this project specifically that I'm using as an example, I really tried to be responsive with my ideas and what I was facilitating. There was a kind of photographic through line because I'd be commissioned by a photographic organisation, and photography is my background and my training. But yeah, it was about kind of thinking through that in an expanded way and responding to the and kind of trying to nurture what was resonating, what was coming up for the young people.
Thank you so much. I love that. Like, I feel like especially when we're working with communities that we may not be a part of, we may not have a lot of experience with, that research aspect is so important because it helps us kind of like figure out how to best represent these people authentically. Just like a quick follow-up question, like how do you balance like I guess personal intuition with like the research that you gather? Do you often find that things that you research, like when you were talking about like you weren't aware, like you weren't too familiar with like the landscape of things like of Worthing. Do you find like what you'd plan to do when going into the project differs very much from after you've done that research and you've like come out with it? Do you feel like when you're researching stuff that it helps to almost like shape the way that you like work or like the things that you produce?
I mean, I definitely went in, with a planning, an idea for planning and like the way in which I was going to facilitate different workshops and the kind of the arc of making or kind of working with groups from collaborating and then perhaps working towards something, depending on what that kind of timeline looks like. But predominant I think I led with honesty, and I was clear with the young people that I was based in Brighton, knew kind of what was going on there. A lot of them knew that the school that I was working at, some of them went to the school as well at the time, and then I'd actually left that school. So yeah, I led with that, and they responded really openly to that, and kind of filled in some of those gaps really. And a lot of my work I'm interested in mapping and reflecting on kind of more informal and grassroots forms of kind of like I suppose like knowledge, and systems of knowledge, like where these groups of people might go to get something otherwise. So I, tried to facilitate those conversations and kind of mapping activities, photo walks and otherwise. And I was lucky that these projects were quite long form, so I had quite a lot of time to build up that kind of trust and dialogue as well.
Thank you. It's really fun to hear about, especially how you spoke about like mapping. It almost makes it feel like some sort of like visual anthropology, like you're talking to these people and like discovering things about them and like kind of putting that down, and that's really great. So yeah, thank you.
Um, yeah, so I was thinking about this question and just research in general. And I feel like for me, research is just intertwined with everything that I do throughout the project, basically. And I'm not generally talking about kind of academic research, like research papers, policies, like reports, things like that, but just kind of first-hand primary research, people and stories and things like that. And so I guess a lot of my work starts with this idea of listening to local histories, community needs, people's stories, um, and yeah, I don't think that research should be intimidating, because I feel like, if you think about it hard enough, then anything is research if you're curious enough. And so my first job when I left school was as a care worker in a hospital, and I spent a year and a half talking to people, and I didn't really know it at the time, but all of these conversations were my first research, listening, noticing, like holding people's stories. And that really became the foundation of my creative practice now. Um, so a lot of my work is very participatory. It allows multiple different ways for people to engage, participate, collaborate in my projects, and focuses on this idea of like shared power. Um, and I think that all of this came from a very long partnership with Manchester Central Food Bank. It wasn't something that I was ever like formally taught to do, but it was just a process of kind of like honing this practice of engagement and co-creation and kind of collaborating with people, that completely shaped how I work. And so I feel like research is playful, it's not boring, I promise, it's fun. Um, but yeah, it's kind of it provides that like starting point for a project, and I guess it is that community need for each thing that you do.
Yeah, and I think it's very interesting what you said about you do research very early on, whether you realize it or not, with the people that you interact with. And I think that's so true. It's not as black and white as just our computer just taking in words. It's very much the people that tell the stories, the land. I think that's probably from my architecture background, but yeah, I think that was a great point. I'm going to move on to the next question, and this question you might relate to like a personal story, or you might have found an instant where you think it relates. But the question is, where has a design claimed to represent a group but missed? What signs were ignored, and what have changed the outcome, or what would have changed the outcome? Yeah.
So I think what I've had to learn, which is really hard for a people pleaser, is that whenever a project tries to represent a group, it can be and often is met with cynicism, and kind of rightfully so, like people have seen so many initiatives and things, and like not just in the arts sector, across like the all the sectors, we've this is against a backdrop of like so many governmental cuts and like systemic injustices, and the world's a crazy place at the moment. But so many things that have promised impact, and didn't deliver, and felt maybe tokenistic or extractive to the community. And so for me, whenever this cynicism comes up, the question is, where is that coming from? Like, what's the history here, and how can we make sure that this project doesn't repeat the same mistakes? And so to get around that, I think that it's really important to set pretty clear expectations at the start of each project and like manage that scope. But also like building very genuine trust with the people that you're working with, structuring things very democratically, this idea of sharing the power, and a very strong evaluation process and checking in and making sure that this is responding to a need,
Yeah, I mean, I can really echo a lot of what Mimi just said, in terms of, yeah, in terms of like trying to kind of field and hold and be responsive to like element of cynicism, and kind of how to move with that, and it inform like the next step, I suppose, in a proactive way. Yeah, I mean, I worked with a school group in North London over about 8 months, and it was quite rocky from the get-go, to be honest. It was commissioned by an arts organisation, and it was the first time they were working with this school. I'd been invited in as the artist and approached, having done previous work with school groups, and particularly this age group. Um, and yeah, there was it was like kind of running at the same time as a new relationship was building between the arts organization and the school. And naturally people are people, like it takes a long time to kind of for I think programs to run smoothly, and for people to know, especially in school contexts, like what teachers' real capacity is. Like, we were working with a really ambitious, creative, like thoughtful teacher. She had so much on, as well as some personal stuff, and uh, yeah, it came down to being in a school context where someone's, and we're all kind of maybe semi-aware or more aware of what kind of pressure teachers are put under. And when you've got an outside body coming in, especially, I think, an artist in it at this age group, um, where it was, pathway moment, GCSE choosing moment. Yeah, it was a lot of kind of having to sense check some of the external factors of what was kind of going on. And yeah, I think essentially it really affected the kind of it affected kind of, maybe speaking to similar, like that, a kind of element of intuition of like what should I be nurturing creatively, which area or idea should I kind of go down. And I think in the end, I was perhaps a little bit too ambitious with what I wanted to make. I delivered kind of final couple of sessions. I delivered this kind of maquette session. We were building like a smaller version of some of the ideas together, and yeah, it didn't kind of fully land. Some of the ideas kind of landed, but I think, maybe trusting that intuition earlier on, inviting a pause, and not putting so much pressure on myself to make something kind of fully externalized. I think, if there was another way, I could have recorded the journey together. And yeah, yeah, so kind of twofold there, in terms of intuition, and then also recognizing the kind of context you're going into, I suppose.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much to the both of you. Both of your answers were really great. And I guess like what came up, I guess, was that difficulty of creating something that you're sure will kind of resonate with the people that you're creating for, that you're even creating with. So I guess that kind of leads me into my next question. As we said, like one of the biggest challenges in like art, design, architecture, all of that stuff is ensuring that not only the research that we're engaging with, but like what we're creating truly reflects like the realities of the people that we're trying to reach or that we're trying to represent. So like how do you like make sure that what you're researching, what you're looking at, what you're developing isn't just like academic or like detached? Because as Mimi said, it's not just kind of like reading an academic paper or like going on a website, it's talking to people and all that kind of stuff. How do we make sure that we're not detached from those actual lived experiences of the communities that we're engaging with?
And I do just want to quickly add, and I'll run to the next question. I think again with the creative process about what lands and what doesn't land. I guess that is just part of the creative process, and I think it is a learning curve, which is why it's good to have conversations. So you can express your journey, and someone can likewise share theirs, and you can kind of work out together, kind of what is good and what is not. But yeah, sorry to go back to the question without jumping in.
So I think just off the back of that, talking about this idea of like research isn't just studying or, academic research. It's also about testing things and trying things out, small scale, experimenting with activities and just seeing how people respond to it before scaling up. And that way you ensure that it is grounded in people's real experiences and not just your assumptions. But I have to say, like um, maybe this is being slightly too honest, but I feel like the funding landscape at the moment is pretty pretty not good. And people that this period of experimentation and exploration is kind of one of the first parts that goes. People are so focused on this idea of, return on investment. What are we getting for our money? If we fund this community project. And I've just found like so many times people want this amazing engaged community project on like a tiny time frame. They'll be like, oh, can you do all of this in like 2 weeks or something? I'll be like, no, it takes like a year to build genuine, solid trust between people. And then I think that's where, artists are kind of being pushed into this space of, I don't know, like, I guess you're at the mercy of these funders and commissioners. Um, and so that's what I was going to say about that. But I do think that the best way to ensure that you're engaging with people's lived experiences is just spending time in the community. I feel like good engagement is built on like showing face, simply put. Building this familiarity and letting trust develop naturally. I am a huge fan of just like walking into a place, a community center, like, I don't know, a charity, like whatever, just walk in there and talk to somebody in person. It's all about like being there in person, talking to people, and just making that connection, which I think is very valuable.
No, yeah, I love that. I think especially with my experience with research, like at uni and all that kind of stuff, a lot of it was very almost desk-based, and it felt like there's this very strange detachment from like the person who's presenting the work and then who I'm supposed to be designing for. And I think one of the most like important parts of research is that kind of ethnographic kind of thing where we go in and we actually engage with people and we record what they're doing, how they're doing it, instead of relying on our own assumptions on what we think they need or what we think they do and what we think they want to be represented as. So yeah, thank you so much for that.
Yeah, just on that, there's honestly so many times firsthand experience where I've walked into a group being like, right, I've got this amazing creative idea, I share it with them. And instantly, I've been thinking about this for weeks, whatever. Instantly, they'll just be like, oh no, and just move on. And it's like you can't, I mean, obviously, we bring a certain level of like experience or expertise into these spaces in designing these projects, but like the ideas, the response to the needs, that comes from the community.
Yeah, I would say kind of a couple of things like what I a couple of years ago I had a bit of a kind of low moment. I felt that I mean freelancing is hard and kind of like keeping a capacity, keeping a momentum, but also incredible and so much so many people to collaborate with and etc. Um, and I realized that that element of kind of self-care as a facilitator, as in the sense of like you are in it's social practice essentially, like you are in the element of a giving role, and there's ways in which that you can kind of mitigate that, get support with that, hold yourself accountable in different ways. It's a lifelong learning. I think but one of my main things was that I said to myself I really need to endeavor to actually come back to myself and connect more with my my local kind of community, whether that's like a community garden, community centre, and be on the kind of be the participant essentially. And I was based in Southwest London at the time. And essentially what that looked like is joining local community garden, going to the mindful mornings that they did. And I could do that because I was freelance, it was a weekday opportunity. And yeah, kind of slowly it kind of helped me yeah, kind of build up some of those foundations again um of recognizing the kind of small in between moments of people connecting, recognizing the lived experience, the ways in which they're showing up and why, and it not needing to be profound or magical. There's this conception of like the artist going in and teasing something out, and that is a lot of pressure as well, and something that myself and a lot of friends that are also artists, educators or facilitators discuss. Um, and so yeah, that kind of moment of reflective practice, if you're working in this kind of area, is really important. And I would say that's a form of research for yourself as well, that kind of lifelong kind of learning. And then another way, is really just where you can. And my context is maybe slightly different. My context is that I am approached or kind of propose kind of projects and programs and things, and yeah, it just needs to have a long timeline. If you want to be able to connect with people, you need that time, and you need that kind of continuity, twofold, and any kind of ethical commissioner should see that as well. But as Mimi says, we're orbiting around a very particular funding landscape, and yeah, it's also really important to recognize that, and which yeah, which maybe comes back to that idea of not idea, but speaking to people, getting a sense of other people working in your field, engaging in reflective practice, inviting the people you're working with to, if they can, offer some kind of continued professional practice for their pool of freelancers. For example, this one health charity, arts and health charity that I work with, has started in the last year putting on training for their pool of freelancers, and it's a point of solidarity. Like, I don't want to get into the whole union thing, but as a freelancer, it's a whole conversation about how do you find um, that moment of solidarity. So yeah, I think that was a bit muddled, but yeah.
No, yeah, I understand completely. I think what you said about like researching self-care is like research for yourself, because I feel like once you're taking care of yourself, you're able to give more to those people that you're like doing a service for, like trying to help out or just trying to like get to know and like trying to understand. So I think that's really important too, especially in this kind of like framework that we're working in. As you said, with like things like funding, people wanting you to get like massive projects done in like teeny tiny timelines. It's really important to remember that you are also such an essential part of the process, like as a creative, as an artist, as a designer, even just as a person. And so taking care of yourself and like involving yourself and like, yeah, caring for yourself is also a great way to care for these communities because you are going into these communities and you'll have an impact too. And I think that's lovely. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So thank you for the answers. This next question kind of links to what we've been speaking about the lived experience is a lot more efficient when you kind of coordinate a design project. So speaking to people, hearing them, being in the environment. So the question that I'm going to say is, what steps do you take to involve community members as co-creators or co-researchers into your project, and how do you sustain these collaborations?
So I can go. So I have recently been working on a project. It's been an amazing project with Save the Children. It's myself and another artist called Emma Martin, and it's exploring how play can positively shape children's well-being, learning, and connections in their schools, homes, and wider communities. And so I guess for me, this has been like my first kind of big like research project that I've done, where a huge part of the project has been like doing active research. And it's been amazing. And I credit a lot of the co-creation to Emma, who has played such an amazing role in this project, connecting all of these primary schools across Manchester together with us. But as I said, a huge part of this has been the research, and we we got children to undertake research themselves. And at the start of the project, when we were designing it, we were thinking, how the hell are we going to make a bunch of 10-year-olds engage with research and do research themselves, be co-researchers in this project? We thought the only way to make this playful and fun is to kind of turn it into a game. And so, do you remember those little chatter boxes? Some people called them fortune tellers as well. The little folded paper um, games. We got all of our collaborator children to create these chatter boxes and fill them with questions about play. And then we sent them out into their playgrounds, their parks, their homes, to ask people about play. And it was kind of amazing because they got 1,500 responses just from doing this and recording them in their like play research books. And then all of this research kind of came together where we had this big sharing day where we invited a lot of what we called powerful people around Manchester. Just people who had kind of local influence. There was councillors there were people who were in charge of the kind of like local environment, like just kind of key stakeholders. And we invited them for a big picnic in the library. And we made them play games with their food. We made them make this whole lunch through like, I don't know, like throwing a dice and like playing games. And it was really, really fun. And then the children sat them down and presented back their research to the powerful people. And it was really exciting to do it in this way. That it was a really engaging way to like share research and also do it like in a fun way. I've never seen all of these like powerful people sitting down on a picnic blanket with like a smiley face made out of rice crackers and tomatoes. But yeah, it was great. And then in October, we're coming back together to compile like all of this research and all of the other parts of the project into a toolkit so that other areas across Manchester, across the UK, will be able to use these play findings and like create more opportunities for play in other parts of the country.
Yeah, I think that's great, especially because when you do your design, you think about the stakeholders, and I don't think it's really, especially in my field, I don't think you think about the children a lot or enough, but they're such a like an important part. They will kind of live in this kind of design and be a part of it. So yeah, it's interesting to hear how you've managed to kind of collaborate with people of the future. So thank you.
I think just on that quickly, I think it with children, it is uh kind of like naturally quite a top-down approach.
Yeah, because I think it's too easy for me to be insensitive, kind of brushing to the side.
Yeah, I was gonna say I love the chatterbox idea. I was obsessed with them when I was a kid, so that seems so fun. And I think it's really nice that you guys thought about who you're trying to research with, who you're trying to talk to, and then kind of like shaped your approach and your practice around their needs instead of just kind of what you needed from them, which I think is such an important part because I feel like sometimes we go in and say, we need this, we need this, we need this, and I want it in this format and I need it. This is how it's easiest for me to digest, but we don't really think about how it'd be easiest for them to kind of like give it to us. Like I think sending a kid like a questionnaire of like 100 questions is a nightmare. It's not going to work. But like thinking about what would they enjoy? Like what would they like to partake, and how would we also get what we need? Like that kind of like collaborative, and it's almost less of like a take and take and more like a give and take, like when you consider the needs of the people that you're researching and how they will best communicate with you. So I think that's awesome. Thank you so much.
I've worked on a program. This will be my third year working on a program, working with a group of adults in assisted living accommodation in East London, and 2 of those years it's been co-facilitated, which is like you know, already there's a more horizontal way in which you know, you're working together and delivering and sharing with a group of people. I really wish all funding models could account for more co-facilitation, because already it invites, you know, a different type of interaction that then I think does yeah, kind of nurture these ideas that you're asking around co-research and co-production. And yeah, I mean, with this one project, I've you know, been lucky essentially in that it's been possible that because I've built this relationship with this organization and then with this group of people, that there's no set. I mean, there's kind of suggestive thematics and approaches, and you know, they know my practice by now, which kind of time has allowed that. But I'm essentially, you know, myself and my co-facilitator, we can facilitate particular exchanges in the first workshop context or in the moment in which that we're kind of re-engaging in a workshop series. And we they told us they'd like to come back to the gallery, and so we went back to the gallery space, but went to the library that the gallery space has, and there was a lot of conversation from one group about the use of books and the kind of preservation and this archive and this kind of, you know, don't touch that thing over there. I mean, that's a huge conversation within galleries and like participation anyway, where it's not kind of, you know, meeting a lot of sensory needs and things. But there was this one participant who spoke a lot about working and drawing, writing, using actual books as paper, essentially using them as a diary. And this kind of created a real firm through line. So yeah, kind of listening, creating a condition of kind of openness, you know, I think inviting in conversations that can kind of counteract the sturdiness or dryness of institutions, of spaces, is just really important. And sometimes it falls flat, and you know, some groups want a day out, want to like chill and hang out in a gallery, like not wanting to be kind of critique it, or do you know what I mean? So, and that's also, you know, completely fine. But yeah, like kind of just in this project, the ability to create a through line with kind of comments and conversations that are made, and really try and reflect that back to the groups, in terms of like, you know, we're listening to material inquiry, to more thematic inquiry, like where are we going, and why is based on conversations, and I've also, you know, if you're working with a group for a long amount of time and it's you know, sharing yourself is kind of first and foremost, like, you know, where is kind of ethical and what's the word, like comfortable to do so. Um, you know, kind of openness is certainly met with openness, I found. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think I really liked what you said about like that kind of almost like horizontal hierarchy, because I think sometimes when we think about like projects and how we work, it can often feel like we're on the top. The people that we're talking to are kind of like on the bottom and we're just kind of like extracting from them. So it's nice to kind of see that. everyone's kind of on the same level. As you said, openness like leads to openness as well, and that's really lovely. And I guess that kind of leads into like our other question, which is basically about authorship and like returning power to community members that we engage with. Like, how do you ensure that power is shared, and especially when decisions may impact like community identity or like the way the community runs? For example, like Ava, when you said you were going into schools and you were talking and you were doing projects and like classes with them, how do you make sure that what you're doing also brings power back to them and not just kind of like using them as a resource almost?
Yeah, I mean, in that context, um kind of led with inviting them to engage with their kind of imagination. And what I found was actually they found confidence in standing in referring to the kind of hyper local, I think yeah, it was a real insight into what was relevant, what was comfortable, what was confident in discussing and using as like basis for creative kind of making. And so yeah, I was careful and essentially just to try to change my approach. What was kind of quite interesting is that when you're going into a school context, like a you're going into already like policy and behavioral stuff and like reward systems and stuff, and I find that quite challenging. And the group at first, and a couple of young boys particularly, found it quite funny in the way that they were using their imagination. They thought that it was a kind of bending of the rules, and it was a breaking of the rules, and that's why they were doing that. So there was a kind of trying to engage with that being part of it as well, and it was quite hard, like um, you know, especially yeah, especially um, when essentially they just thought it was funny. Um, and yeah, I really had to lean into that and kind of let go, and actually I was able to see a in kind of had to put a bit of a spin in it as well. Like um, it's a form of imagination, kind of like fibbing, sharing, and all the giggles that kind of come with that. Yeah, I don't know if that answers, but
No, it did. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so I think that in the early stages, I think that authorship should be shared by all participants or all kind of parties in the project. The community are the ones who are setting the agenda, they're sharing the stories, they're deciding what feels important to them. Um, Many of my projects start from this position of like bringing together a steering group or a resident group or some kind of like project stakeholder group. And they then guide the rest of the project. And I was kind of thinking about this as well, about steering panels. It got me on a tangent of thinking about like how steering panels should be paid. And I think, I mean, I think that they should be paid. That's my opinion. But I also, on the flip side, I do think that it would be amazing if we lived in this world where everything wasn't so transactional. But we don't. And so I think that it's about recognizing that lived experience and local knowledge are real expertise, and this expertise deserves payment, just like professionals or academic input, and also, the artists and facilitators, if they're getting paid for it, then, I think that a panel should be as well. And yeah, I think that ultimately a successful project is where you walk away from it, where everyone feels that kind of collective sense of belonging over it. And it feels like something that is part of everybody, and people can say, I was involved with that, I kind of did this, I did that, and so yeah.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Some great answers, because I feel like that is a very challenging question about the authorship. But I think you summed it up perfectly about at the end, everyone can look at it and feel a sense of belonging, and they've added their their input. I'm gonna move to my next question, which I think, like I gave again, there's a lot of topics that we cover and we touch on a little bit, especially when you spoke about visual mapping and you spoke about the for the children. I can't remember with the what's it called, the hands.
The
Uh,
chatterboxes, all fortune tellers.
yeah, there you go. About how for different audiences and different kind of businesses and communities that you work with, you have to be kind of adaptable and flexible with your language creatively. And so the question that I'm going to ask is, how do you turn research into plain language visuals or experiences so non-specialists can engage and respond meaningfully?
So I think that the most important thing is to create a space for people to respond in their own words. So I'll often use very open-ended prompts or very playful tools that let people make sense of the research through their own language and experiences. And to be honest, I found this question quite hard because I kind of avoid this idea of like a top-down approach, as if cultural workers are the translators of big ideas. Because I mean, sometimes that is true. If it is like, I don't know, working with an academic with a like really complex piece of research. But often, I see my role more as like designing a space where people can engage with those ideas in fun and creative ways. Once the door is open, they don't need someone to tell them what it means because they already know how it connects to their life. And so, yeah, I think that yeah, I think it's a tricky question. It's definitely hard.
Yeah, I found it a hard question as well. I think um, what I've found is I've been working with this arts and health charity, and we've been running walking workshops and around different green spaces that are near hospital sites for groups of people that are in cardiac rehabilitation but have been signed off for uh yeah, so like signed off in terms of like health based, so fitting well enough to amble essentially. And as much as I can do research into the kind of like social history of these different green spaces, and elements like that, or kind of think through in more trying to think of another example. Um, think through in yeah, irrelevant to kind of history based reflections or prompts or exercises, or related to things that perhaps engaged in more of a tether with my own practice. Um, what seems to what seems to just really resonate is kind of holding or facilitating or kind of teasing out conversations about memory of the in the site, the walking, and and some of the kind of some of the ways in which kind of we as people think about spaces, we think through the seasons, we think in sensory ways, memory, etc. So yeah, that the kind of more feeling based things, and that yeah is just yeah, kind of participant led really, and responding to yeah, and then kind of recognizing moments where we've had the opportunity to collaborate with ecologists and other community groups, and like where different kind of forms of knowledge sharing and kind of layers of kind of geography and can be appreciated, like how can we invite that, and it's a real yeah you know it's it's an ongoing thing. Um, yeah.
Thank you so much, guys. I think especially like with the comment about the question, I kind of understand where you're coming from because I guess we were talking a lot about how we didn't really want that like top-down approach and how we wanted people to be able to come with their own kind of like words and their own experiences. So I think that's thank you so much for the feedback on the question. But yeah, so thank you so much for the discussion. It's been lovely, and it's been so great to hear from you guys, like hearing your different opinions and how you guys use research in your practice, how you use it in your everyday lives, like even just like your opinions about the sector and like all of that kind of stuff. So I guess to wrap up, we just want to ask, what advice would you give to emerging artists or organizers or designers or anyone who's just interested, who want to integrate research into their practice, and like how can they do so in ways that are ethical, inclusive, like accessible, as you said, like kind of destroying that hierarchy of like we want something from you and like seeing people as resource. So if you have any tips or like any advice for anyone who's interested in that, that would be awesome. Thank you.
As a kind of freelancer, you kind of like and I think I touched on this in an earlier question, but you kind of like orbit in and around organization, like I definitely have my own value system into how I want to react, kind of engage and react with and be with people that I work with, but you kind of orbit in and out of various kind of aims and objectives when it comes to programs and like and things like that. So, I would say if you're kind of beginning to work in this way, um, it's as much as a research to find kind of groups that people that are working in similar ways essentially, and that can be through kind of going to different training opportunities that different arts organizations hold, reaching out to people, forming relationships where you can, kind of creating a bit of a sphere of accountability. And yeah, I've also noticed in and around kind of social practice, and I mean, it's definitely not a new thing in a lot of ways, but there's a lot more opportunity to be part of reflective practice groups. So it's, you can be part of a workshop series, you can brief and perhaps debrief with a co-facilitator, with a communities programmer, with a, pastoral support, etc. But yeah, being part of a kind of reflective practice group is yeah has been really helpful in the past for me. So I suppose like research as community building as an extension of your practice as well, would be one of my advice. And also like financially and practically, like there's a lot of amazing resource that we can draw from in terms of, this is a tangent, but yeah, in terms of how we can advocate for some kind of sector change. Feels a bit huge, but to get a sense of like the landscape of payment, and working with different places don't operate as a some kind of singular. Try and kind of create that sense checking, accountability circle would be one of my key pieces of advice. Because that then ripples out into the way you facilitate, into the way you practice, and into your relationships with people, because that's what it's all about, really.
Yeah, I definitely echo that about network and, just kind of holding each other accountable. But I've got 3 points to leave on. Firstly, I would say don't be intimidated by research. Formal research can be a great starting point to spark new ideas, but informal research, you're probably already doing this every day, just by noticing, listening, asking questions. And the key is just recognizing it as part of your creative practice. Um, Also, work responsibly. Ask who's benefiting from your project, what need is it responding to, and who might be excluded, and how can you shift that? Because research is never neutral. It carries a lot of power. So think about how you're holding that responsibly. But also, as a reminder, you don't have to be perfect, and you will learn through trying always. And the last point is being clear on your boundaries, because this is working in the community is very emotional work. It deals with people's real lives, and you can't fix everything. Um, you can design projects that are ambitious, but also sustainable for you and all of your collaborators as well. and please be kind to yourself in this process. But it's worth it.
I think it's been like a very interesting conversation, and I think as Eva said, like openness leads to openness. So I appreciate the vulnerability to kind of talk on these topics. And so yeah, thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, just saying thank you so much. It's been lovely to talk to you guys and to learn from you. And yeah, as Louis said, thank you so much for your openness and your vulnerability. And yeah, it's been lovely. It's been great.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you. And great to hear from Mimi as well. I've been making notes. Thanks for your great questions as well, Louis and Jen.
Thank you.
No worries. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Goodbye.